I can do better than that. I've got the shortened top housing from a Retina Reflex S or 3S that I can fit over here to keep my meter in position. Let's put a single screw in the end to hold that. Of course, the screw that should be there is not present. There it is. Checking the run of my meter cord. Of course, one of them is on the wrong pulley again. That's correct. I'll pass over the idler pulley at the bottom of the camera in parallel, and that's correct. Stay. My cable drum. Okay. There's the cord from the back. The back position is that one. Let's just even these two cords up slightly, because they're very divergent in length at the moment. They're not coupled to the drum at the top of the camera. They're running around the drum, but they're not locked into it. It's the front, this is the rear. The rear runs to the top of the pulley, I believe. I'm going to put a little bit of synthetic grease on the spindle of that pulley. Not completely soak it. That should go to the top of the pulley. We'll roll that into position. The other should go to the bottom of the pulley. And of course it's come off all its pulleys all the way down the chain. Oh, that's nearly it. Now I've got a twist in it, which I do not want. That should go to the back, that should go to the front, that should go on there. That looks about right. So, can I get my tensioning spring hooked into place? Which goes where? All the way around there? Yes, it did. And why is that not in the right pulley again? That's sitting correctly, is it? It is. I think I've just achieved that. I think we've just got our cord in. Now I've got to get my tangle untangled at the bottom because I've got some of the cord is, one cord is running underneath the other one and catching on it. And I just want them to run nice and neatly and not in a tangle. Well, it's looking promising. That looks useful. Well, after a considerable amount of toing and froing, which you didn't get to see, I have my meter cord connected now. I'm quite happy with the action of that meter cord, and I think that'll work well for me. So I'll put some synthetic grease on the transfer shaft, or that transfers the action of the shutter cocking action from the cocking rack at the back of the camera through to the front of the camera where it can cock the shutter. So I'll just set that in the body. What's that? Now that's just a little bit of grease, that's fine. Just wondering what that foreign body was. And the struggle here, what's the struggle here going to be? Well, the struggle here is to get the shutter release coupled up, which is here. I'm not entirely sure whether it's best to fit the front with the shutter cocked or uncocked. I'm just going to mark this so I can get an indication of how those gears sit. I think cocked. I think it'll work better cocked than uncocked. I think that's going to give me a better chance of success. What do we have to couple up? We have to couple up this gear here to this gear here, and this pin through here into the centre of this drum here. And what else? One other thing which I'd completely forgotten about, our rangefinder coupling pin. Does it go right through the camera? It does, in which case I can fit it from the outside. Let me check and make sure that that is the case. I'm looking at this pin now, making sure that it's symmetrical. And it can pass right through from front to back, and it can. So there's no reason I can't fit that after the front of the camera is on, and so that's what I'll choose to do. So my main task and problem is to get that shutter release shaft, the end of this here, into this loop. And I may need to lift it into position, so I'm going to put a little bit of cord over that to hold it up while I lower the front into position. Now I just managed to release the shutter then, which I didn't want to do. So all I had to do was bump the shutter release on the shutter, of course, to achieve that. There's a little bit of play on that, so I can wiggle the shaft from this end to raise it. How would I go about doing that? If I try and get the shutter release shaft, if I take it out of the camera to try and feed it in afterwards, I'm very likely to end up disturbing the meter, and if I disturb the meter, there's every likelihood that the cord will come off the meter, and I'll have a 20-minute fight to get it back in place. So I'm very keen to avoid that. That's not being particularly helpful. I'll try something else. Right, attempt 492. Well, it's not quite as bad as that, but sometimes it feels like it. Why is that not pointing where I would expect it to point? because it's in the wrong position. That would be why. Now most of the secret is depressing the shutter release down as far as it will go from the side of the camera here, so I can get that shutter release pin in place. And when you know what you're doing, it drops straight into place. Why couldn't it do that for me before? Now I'm rocking on something, and I would imagine it's the pin for the meter coupling. I'll see if I can wriggle that into place. I think that just dropped into place. I'm less convinced about the cocking rack coupling to the shutter. Let's see if I try and cock this. No, that most definitely that cocking rack is not coupled to anything. Let's try that again. No, it's not cocking it. It doesn't feel like it's coupled at all. So perhaps that shaft fell out of position completely. Certainly something's rocking, it's holding us up. Feels like something's rocking in the middle of the camera, but that seems to be fine. It's not held up on that moulding. Is the meter coupled? The meter's coupled. Something just dropped into place. No, I can hear that cocking rack floating about. It's fallen out of place. So, back where we were. Unhook the shutter release. There is that shaft which had dropped out of place completely. Get that settled into position. Oh yes, it's keen just to fall over. You've only got to look at it the wrong way, it falls over. And then of course it's no danger that's going to go into place. That pin on here has to drop into a hole here. Quite possibly when they made these things in the factory they would have had a jig for aligning that, I would guess. Let's get this meter sorted out. Yes, I think there's my start position. There's no bracket that holds this shaft in the camera. it's simply held in place once the front is in place. Of course, getting the front in place is the challenge for the day. The meter's coupled, so that pin's in place. The shutter release is coupled, but our cocking shaft is not. I'll put a couple of loose screws in the base here and do some wiggling. See if I can encourage that shaft into place. I'll look from the top, see if I can see anything. I probably can't. You know, it floats around, it's only a case of getting it to fall into position really, and we should be good to go. Meter's coupled. That could conceivably be in place. No, the shutter release is definitely jammed there. It does not want to move. So there's something not right there. No, that's not in place. The shutter release is out of place. It's behind it instead of through the hole. Oh, I don't remember this model being as difficult to deal with the last few times I've had to deal with it. So something is not right. Well, 10 minutes of backwards and forwards, a lot of wriggling and rude words being said. And I have the shutter assembly back on the body, coupled to the meter, coupled to the film advance obviously, and it's all working apparently correctly. So what was the secret? I don't know, probably just not holding my mouth right, I would say. Anyway, the main thing is it's together. I'm just going to be very carefully checking the exposure meter to make sure that I have got the cord on the right way around the drum. If inadvertently I have one of the cords running the wrong way, the exposure meter runs the wrong way and it won't move through its range, and it would, at the very best case, would only ever be accurate at one particular position, and everywhere else it would be increasingly wrong. So I'm hoping I have got my meter cord coupled correctly. I'll be going away to check that. That being the case, I hope to finish working on this camera. If no other problems appear, if I've done my meter correctly, the next task will be to clean and adjust the rangefinder. Well, here we have the camera back where you saw it a couple of minutes ago. I suppose it was always a possibility that I'd put the meter cord in wrong, and I had put the meter cord in wrong. But basically what the thing I'd done wrong was at the bottom of the camera, where the cord runs across the bottom and up to the pulley on this side, I had the rearmost cord going to the top of the pulley. It should have been the other way round. It should have been the frontmost cord going to the top of the pulley. So of course the meter turned the wrong way. So I was a little bit annoyed about that, but it did give... While I was in there, I replaced the meter cord with some new cord. The original looked alright when I'd started doing the repair, but by the time I'd fought with it a bit, it wasn't looking quite so happy. So there you go. So it's got new cord in the meter. Everything else has gone nice and smoothly. I did discover an easier way to get the front back on the camera. It turns out that if you're feeling very brave, what you can do is remove the shutter release shaft and the film release button from the top of the camera. Leave them off completely. Makes it much easier to get the front back on the camera, of course, because you don't have to try and couple the shutter release. And then carefully lifting your meter away without letting the tension off, which would let the cord come off the pulleys, you can put your shutter release shaft back in and get it coupled up with the shutter. And the same with the film release button, and then hook your meter back in place firmly. That's a bit fraught, of course, because there's every likelihood that the cord will take the opportunity to jump off the pulleys and you're going to have the front back off. But it made it much, much easier when all I had to cope with was coupling the meter coupling about here in the camera on the drum, and the transfer shaft which sits about here. When I only had two things to couple up and not the shutter release lever as well, it made it much, much quicker to put the front on the camera. So there are lessons learned. I'll remember that next time, hopefully. This is the first one of these I've done for a couple of years, and they don't come around very frequently. I would say in all likelihood I've only ever serviced perhaps 4 of them, 5 maybe. The 2S is quite an uncommon model. But this one is well on the way to recovery now. The next thing I'll do is clean up that rangefinder, put our lens groups back into the shutter assembly, and get everything back together.